Welcome back, everyone. We're diving into some pretty heavy stuff today.
Yeah, definitely a bit intense.
We're looking at the conflicts happening right now in Gaza and Lebanon. But, and this is where it gets really interesting, we're going to be exploring it from a spiritual angle.
Right, taking a look at things from a messianic Jewish perspective.
Exactly. And to help us unpack all this, we're turning to an interview with Rabbi Jason Sobel.
It's a Charisma Media interview, actually.
Right. And he doesn't just, offer some surface level commentary.
No.
He goes deep, connecting these events to some pretty major biblical concepts.
It's the Anakim.
The Nephilim.
Even prophecies about the Messiah.
Yeah. And full disclosure, when I first saw this material, I was a little skeptical.
I get that.
But I got to say, the more I read, the more I got pulled in.
Rabbi Sobel has a way of making you rethink things.
He really does, especially his use of gematria.
Oh, yeah. That's some fascinating stuff.
Totally. For those who aren't familiar, gematria is the system where
each Hebrew letter has a numerical value.
Right. And you can find connections to other words with the same value.
Like hidden meanings.
Yeah, it's almost like a secret code in the Bible.
Yeah, definitely.
But before we go full on gematria, let's start with what Rabbi Sobel says about the conflict in Gaza.
Okay, so he starts off with this pretty interesting connection. He connects the name Hamas.
The group, right.
Yeah, to the word Hamas that appears in Genesis 6.
Genesis 6, that's the story of Noah, right?
That's the one. And he points out that in that context, the word is associated with violence and evil.
So, wait, is he just saying the word sounds similar?
I mean, there's that, but
or is there more to it?
He thinks it's more than just a coincidence.
Interesting.
He goes back into biblical history and brings up the Anakim.
The Anakim, remind me, who are they again?
They were a race of giants.
Oh, right.
Mentioned in the Old Testament.
Okay.
And the Bible says that Joshua couldn't drive them out completely, especially from the area of Gaza.
So giants, that sounds like something out of like a fantasy novel.
Well, I know, right?
But are they really relevant to what's happening today?
Well, that's what Rabbi Sobel is getting at.
Okay.
He says that the Philistines, who used to live in Gaza, are the namesake of the modern Palestinians.
Oh, right. I remember that.
And guess where the Philistines were said to have come from originally?
Gaza.
Exactly.
So he's connecting these ancient giants to the current conflict.
That's his argument.
Wow.
And he takes it even further, bringing in the Nephilim.
Okay, now those, I definitely remember. Weren't they like fallen angels?
Yeah, some interpretations say they were fallen angels who mated with human women.
And the Anakim were their descendants.
That's right.
So let me get this straight.
Sure.
He's suggesting that because the Anakim, who might be descended from these fallen angels, weren't driven out of Gaza, their presence, or I don't know, some kind of spiritual residue of their presence, could be influencing the conflict today.
You got it.
That's a pretty intense idea.
It is, right. And he uses gematria to back it up.
Oh, okay, so this is where the numbers come in.
Right. He says that in Hebrew, the numerical value of both Anakim and Nephilim is 200.
The same number.
The same exact number.
So he sees that as a sign that they're connected on a deeper level.
Yeah, like a mystical connection.
It's like he's saying there's this whole other layer of meaning in the Bible.
And gematria helps us see it.
Wow, that's pretty mind-blowing.
I know, it makes you think, right?
It definitely does. I gotta admit, I'm still trying to wrap my head around the whole giants thing.
It takes some getting used to.
But I'm definitely intrigued by this whole gematria concept.
Me too, it's fascinating.
So we've talked about Gaza, we've touched on gematria, but what about the conflict in Lebanon?
Ah, yes, Lebanon. Well, that's where things get even more interesting.
Okay, I'm ready. Tell me more. Rabbi Sobel brings in the F-35 fighter jet here.
Oh, yeah, this is where it gets really interesting.
So how does he connect, like, a modern fighter jet to ancient prophecy?
Well, he starts by looking at the Hebrew name for the Israeli F-35,
okay,
which is Adil.
Adir.
And that translates to Mighty One.
Mighty One. That sounds
familiar.
Yeah, like I've heard that somewhere before.
He connects it right back to Isaiah 10.34.
Isaiah.
Yeah, the passage that talks about the fall of Lebanon.
By a mighty one.
Exactly.
So he's saying that using the F-35, the mighty one, in the conflict with Lebanon is like a fulfillment of that prophecy.
That's how he sees it.
Wow, that's a pretty bold statement.
It is, but he goes even further.
Okay, how so?
He says that the fall of Lebanon, as described in Isaiah 10, is a sign
of what?
The coming of the Messiah.
Oh, wow.
He even mentions that some in the Jewish community are starting to see these events as like harbingers of the Messiah.
Really?
He points to articles in Israeli newspapers that are talking about this growing messianic expectation.
So basically, he's saying that for people who believe in this interpretation, these conflicts aren't just, political stuff happening.
Right.
It's like a sign of something much bigger.
Exactly. Something with spiritual significance.
And then he brings in this whole end of summer concept.
Oh, right. That's another layer to all of this.
Can you explain that a bit more? Because honestly, it kind of sounds cryptic to me.
Okay, so he connects it to what Jesus said about the summer season.
What did Jesus say about summer?
Well, in Matthew 24:32, Jesus talks about the budding of fig trees as a sign of his return.
Fig trees.
Yeah, and Rabbi Sobel connects that to the idea of summer.
Okay.
He also points out that the Jewish calendar doesn't have any biblical holidays in the summer months.
It doesn't.
Nope. The spring holidays, like Passover and Pentecost, they were all fulfilled at Jesus' first coming.
Okay, so what about the fall holidays?
Ah, those are the key.
How so?
According to this interpretation, the fall holidays, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, those all point to events that are associated with the second coming.
Oh, I see.
So Rabbi Sobel believes we're living in the end of summer right now.
End of summer.
Like a transition period before those fall holidays start.
And he thinks that's a sign that the Messiah's return is close.
That's exactly what he's suggesting.
Wow.
And to support this idea, he points to things happening in Israel right now.
Like what kinds of things?
He talks about trees budding, the land being rejuvenated, the preparations for the red heifer sacrifice, the efforts to rebuild the temple.
All these things are happening now.
Yeah, and he sees them as like tangible signs that align with this end of summer idea.
I can see how that would get people excited, especially if they believe this interpretation.
Definitely.
But what about people who, don't necessarily buy into all this?
Well, one thing that really struck me about Rabbi Sobel is his optimism.
Even with all this conflict going on.
Yeah, he has this unwavering belief that God is in control, that God has a plan for the future.
A good claim.
A plan that ultimately leads to peace and redemption.
I gotta say, that's a pretty comforting thought given everything happening in the world right now.
It is, right.
So how does he think we should, navigate these uncertain times?
He really emphasizes prayer.
Prayer.
Especially for Israel and the United States.
Okay.
He believes that our words have power, that we can partner with God through prayer and declaration.
To bring about his plan?
Exactly.
So it's not just about sitting back and watching things unfold.
Nope, we have a role to play.
Through prayer and our words.
And he even connects this to the current Hebrew decade.
Which is?
Represented by the Hebrew letter Pei, which means mouth.
So the mouse decade.
Yeah, and he sees that as a sign that, our words are even more important during this time.
It's fascinating how he weaves all these different things together.
Right.
The prophecies, gematria, current events, even language.
It all fits into his interpretation.
It's a pretty compelling narrative, I gotta admit.
It is, whether you agree with it or not.
It definitely makes you think about these conflicts in a whole new way.
That's for sure.
Okay, so we've talked about Rabbi Sobel's take on the conflicts in Gaza and Lebanon.
We've explored gematria, the end of summer concept.
And his emphasis on prayer and the power of words.
Right.
But I want to circle back to something we touched on earlier.
What's that?
The human element. All of this is happening to real people.
Absolutely.
How does he address the pain and suffering that comes with these conflicts?
Yeah, it's easy to get caught up in all the, analysis and the prophecies and stuff.
I know what you mean.
But we can't forget about the people who are actually living through this stuff.
Absolutely. It's real people's lives.
So does Rabbi Sobel, acknowledge that.
Oh, yeah. He definitely doesn't shy away from the reality of it. He talks about the suffering, the complexity of these situations.
But he still manages to find hope.
Yeah, for him, it always comes back to God's plan.
Okay.
He sees these conflicts as, like a necessary part of a bigger process.
A process of what?
Redemption.
So even though things might seem bad right now, there's a purpose to it all.
Yeah, and that purpose is ultimately good. That's a really, a hopeful way to look at it.
It is, right?
Like even in the middle of all this turmoil, there's something good coming out of it.
That's how Rabbi Sobel sees it. He believes God is working to bring about his kingdom on earth.
His kingdom.
Yeah, a kingdom of peace, justice, righteousness, all that.
And these conflicts are what? Part of that process?
He describes them as birth pangs.
Birth pangs.
Yeah, like something new is being born.
That's a pretty powerful image.
It is. It makes you think about these events differently.
It does. Instead of just seeing the destruction, you can see it as part of, a transformation.
Exactly. And I think that's what gives Rabbi Sobel so much hope. Even with all the chaos, He really believes God is in control.
That God's working things out.
Yeah, towards his ultimate purpose.
I think that's something we all need to hear sometimes.
Especially these days.
Right. It's easy to get discouraged. But it's good to remember that there's a bigger picture.
That God's got a plan.
A plan that ends in hope.
Exactly.
So what's Rabbi Sobel's, final takeaway for us?
Well, he really encourages us to pray.
Pray.
For Israel, for the United States.
Okay.
To speak words of faith. To declare God's promises. He believes we can actually partner with God through our prayers and our words.
And make a difference.
Yeah, and how things unfold.
That's a pretty empowering thought.
It is, isn't it?
So, wow, this has been quite a deep dive.
It has. We've covered a lot.
Rabbi Sobel's perspective on the conflicts, gematria, the end of summer.
The power of prayer, all of it.
And it really makes you think, if gematria can reveal these hidden connections in the Bible, like a whole other layer of meaning,
right?
What else is out there?
What else is waiting to be discovered?
Exactly. So to our listeners out there, keep exploring, keep questioning, keep searching for those deeper connections.
You never know what you might find.
And until next time, keep diving deep.